Thank you for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you carving out the time. I mean, look, a lot of us are right in the middle of our workday. For some of you, it's 8 o'clock at night. You are all investing in your professional development and networking, meeting people. So thank you very much. 24 years ago, and I just figured this out the other day when I was doing the math, writing this out. 24 years ago, I joined my first startup and I was in customer success. And I want to tell you a quick story to kind of frame the reason why we chose this topic. And then we'll open up the first question. So we were like a competitive local exchange carrier, telecom company. And service was our value in the market. So we leased lines from Verizon and AT&T, but what we really offered was a high quality service, sort of white glove experience. From lead to post sales support, the entire customer journey was really our product. But we quickly realized, and I was too young at the time, but I was dabbling in trying to fix these problems. But we quickly realized we could not keep up the white glove service for every customer. We were not paying attention to our needle movers or our big accounts. We were spending way too much time on our smaller accounts, but we wanted to take care of everyone as if they were the same, right? But we couldn't keep it up to scale. And the question we had was, how were we going to take care of the long tail of small accounts? And when I translate this to solution consulting primarily, or go to market in general, is how do you keep your teams engaged in the accounts that matter the most? All accounts matter, but the ones that really help your business grow without trying to kill the experience for those smaller accounts. And that's really I would say that's the thesis that started this webinar discussion with the panelists you see here. Part of my journey was realizing that this was not a unique problem at all. You know, when I grew into go to market and leadership, and then joined Presales Collective at its inception many years ago, and I was connecting with others, I realized, hey, everybody's having this problem. So I'd like to introduce you all to our panelists today. We have Sean Taylor, and Sean Taylor is a PSC ambassador. So thank you so much for that. And a PSA mentor. So he's a Presales Academy mentor as well. And also a senior director of solutions at Sage Security. So thank you for joining us, Sean.
Thanks, Chris.
We have Akash Bansai. He's the founder and CEO of Storylane. And I love these stories because Akash was actually a pre-sales engineer. I'm continuously motivated by people who were in pre-sales who took the leap to build companies and get into executive roles. Storylane basically solves the eternal problem of like enabling buyers experience the product. So they do it really easily in the sales process. And Akash also spent time with IBM and Sony on very intense hardware software demonstrations. So thank you for joining us, Akash.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris. And yeah, this is a lovely profession. I look back on the early days, and that's what motivated us to start Storylane.
Awesome. Yeah. And then we have Tom Josephson. He's the director of solution consulting at TCP Software. You lead a team of consultants who deliver, I think you guys focus on customized like time, attendance, and scheduling solutions.
Yeah.
And how many years do you have in solution consulting?
How much experience do I have in solution consulting?
Yeah, like how many years?
I think I got my first SC job 8 years ago. So 8 years. And yeah, I always tell people I had a very meandering path, but when I found this is the best job. I love it. I think it's the best job in any company. And I always say I wish there was a major in college for this, and I knew about it when I was in college, because this was for me. So I love it. So unfortunately, only 8 years. So many years before that, dabbling in other things.
Yeah. No, I bet everybody here feels the same way. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to kick us off with just the first kind of burning question, which is why is pre-sales so stretched? Why are we stretched so thin? Why do you think we're the coolest kid on the block? Tom, I'm going to pass it to you. And then I highly encourage the audience, please throw those questions in, take notes. If you could walk away with just 1, 2, 3 ways to make adjustments in your organization, that's a win. So over to you, Tom.
Yeah. when I think about this question, I think about how specialized we are. And whatever the ratio is at your company, whether it's a really generous 3-to-1 or 8-to-1 as it is where I am, what ends up happening is, I think about just how much more we see in the sales process. For example, when I got to TCP, the SEs weren't really involved in discoveries. And that was, to me, I saw that as problematic because we're taking the word of the salespeople. So I pushed to have SCs on the discoveries. And what we quickly realized is most SCs are on 3, 4, 5 times as many discoveries as your best rep. And so they've seen this many, many times. And we're like, okay, we're on these so often. Let's take an active role. Let's really get into being very good at discovery. What ends up happening is if you're a rep and you have maybe 2 or 3 discoveries a week and an SC is doing 5 or more, often more, 5 to 10 where I am, they know this better than they do. And if you're a rep, you're going to get to the point where they know this better than I do. Why wouldn't I turn this over to them? And they know the sales process and they're in many more deals than we are. And so because they're seen as that knowledgeable leader, more and more tasks are moved to them. And so, yeah, which is beneficial because it helps us be leaders and our word carries more weight in these deals. But then there's the other side where you become the victim of your own success. You're too competent, and so you end up getting a lot more than you had bargained for. And that's if I think about my experience, that's where that really comes what it comes down to. We're so good. Why wouldn't you use that great tool, that great resource on your deal?
Yeah,
Love that. And actually, we got a question real quick. I love the question came right in. Thank you, Tom. For discoveries, do you have a team join your business discoveries as well? It's saying for discoveries, do you have your team join like biz qualification calls? I think that's what you're referring to, right, Tom?
So after the qualification, it's the discovery where we're trying to figure out, okay, we've got all the things that we could show. Like I always show a very crude diagram. I show my team like all the cool things we could show and the tiny little circles, what we ought to show. So it's not qualification, although what we find is there's still a degree of qualification happening in these discovery calls, and especially with newer reps. They get on a qualification call and they may not know the product or the industry very well, or they get happy ears, and we get in there and they're like, hey, yeah, we do time and attendance. We don't do payroll. This is not, and they're looking for payroll. That's the crux of their decision. And we're not a really good fit. So sometimes qualification bleeds into that. And we do have to disqualify. I'm trying to cut back on that because then we've wasted that SE's time. But it's predominantly pure discovery, assuming that this is fully qualified.
Thank you.
So I'd want, and Ross asked a question, if SC is doing discoveries, when does the EA do discovery on the commercial side? And Ross, that was kind of the point that I was going to piggyback on top of Tom's commentary just now, is that at Zage, we're very much, and we're a startup, right? So it's a very lean and nimble organization. And we're about a 3-to-1 ratio. But I think we have made a concerted effort to push a lot of the discovery to certainly from the initial phases, a lot of the discovery to the account execs themselves, to get through some of that initial gating, some of that initial. We provide with the platform, we provide a collection of capabilities, and each of those different business drivers can be addressed. So we try to push it off because, again, we are limited in scalability and how we can scale. But the point I was going to bring up, to the question you asked earlier, Chris, I think one of the challenges that we face in in the SC and the pre-sales ranks is that we are multifaceted, right? I think collectively across the board, we're good at public speaking. We're good at technical writing. We're good at solution design. We're good at presenting, right? So all of those different skills that we have as pre-sales consultants or SCs, whatever the title your organization chooses to use, ultimately are leveraged and or in demand by multiple parts of your company, by multiple organizations, right? So maybe you're going to be writing a blog or a collection of blogs. Maybe you're going to be performing webinars, right? LinkedIn Lives, those kinds of things over and above your, let's call it day job of supporting your account managers, right? So I think that's also part of it is that we're stretched very thin because we've got a lot to offer over and above just our that day job of doing the discovery, performing the demonstrations, working on the proof of concepts, right? Ultimately helping to close the deal.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is that good AEs do the discovery really well, but that's the early part of the discovery, what the use case is and such, right? But a lot of it comes down as you are continuing to give a series of demos to different stakeholders and customizing those demos. So therein lies those intricate questions that helps win deals, right? So that's the crux of it. I think it's the journey that really when stakeholders or your buyers are in lockstep, that's when you discover things, and that's where pre-sales uh, conversational discoveries matter, and that's what sales wants from pre-sales, like to come in there and help lock the deal in a way that really the buyer sees that the it's not a vendor we are getting, it's really somebody as a partner who's going to understand us, truly implement this in the organization, because that's finally the win, right? A lot of SaaS tools today really make their way into a company, but they never succeed, right? And some of the things that we are doing in Storylane actually help us with that. Actually, just understanding for the stakeholders who are championing the products to really just push it forward and spread it across.
Yeah, that's great. And there's multiple questions and comments being made. So thank you to everyone who's joined. We've reached over 100 people live, and I always like to see that number. So thank you so much. The next piece, though, I can't help but think we have a lot of different answers, and I think it drives me to think of like the maturity of the organization, the size, the scale of the organization. I know our audience, probably some of you are working at large companies, and some of you are just like in Sean's boat, where it's a small startup. So the maturity of your organization is going to guide a lot of aspects of scale, consistency, experience for the buyer, especially. As your organization scales, there will be points of time when it'll become apparent that a change or an efficiency is necessary. Like you're going to find that wall pretty quickly. So as a leader and as somebody who is just driven and hungry to make a change in their org, how do you bring it to your executive team and frame it? It's something I'm very interested in. It was like, how do you frame this conversation to make sure you get budget for that tool? And Akash, like you said, a lot of these tools come in the org and they're not successful, right? Maybe they didn't have the right champion or experience. So Tom, I'll pass it to you. You've done this at your organization. So walk us through that real world experience. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, actually, I had to do this with Storylane. So the thing that I was thinking about in approaching this is actually something I tell people I tell especially my more senior SCs, which is it is now selling internally. You know, I tell them, hey, if you're on a big enterprise deal, you're going to be selling more internally to the deal team than you are to the prospect. And I took this and thought, okay, how do I sell to the executive team? And they're all different in how you approach them. And there's some where it's a little bit more subjective. You know, I think we're being spread thin. Wherein, I think about our CEO that I work with, he is all about ROI. And Akash will remember this when I settled on Storylane among other vendors. I told Akash, hey, if I'm going to get the funding for this, I have to have a rock solid ROI on this.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
How could
yeah,
you push me?
yeah,
Yeah,
I was like, hey, put one together. And
100%.
then afterwards, I was like, okay, Akash, now you and I are going to work through this, and I need to know every single piece of this. I have to be unimpeachable when this comes up and when I present it. And that made a huge difference. Where if I can show them, hey, I think this is going to save us X amount of dollars, or it might save us whatever X amount of time, or whatever it may be. And these figures make sense. They're not just pulled out of the sky, and there's a legitimate argument behind it. And some of that was what Akash had experienced before. Some of it was taking market data and folding that in. That made a huge difference. The other thing that I think about, and again, Akash can hope, maybe Akash is going to tell me that I'm totally off on this, and I can accept that. We've always been, all of us here, we've been on the side of selling, and we've all dealt with good buyers and bad buyers. And what I thought about going through this is, I want to be the buyer I wish I encountered when selling. And I would tell Akash is like, hey, here's what I'm worried about with your product that I've seen that others do. I haven't seen y'all do this. I need to know, yeah, is this something you can't do? And if you can, I need to see it. This is my process. These are the people I'm going to talk to. These are the things that I need to know. Here's the date. And anytime a date got pushed out, and it happened, and gosh, you know this, it got pushed out halfway through. I wanted them to know that, because I think about, these are the things I would want to know as a buyer. I think I've answered two parts to this question. I'll wrap this up and turn it over to Akash, especially to keep me honest. The first part is, know who you're selling to, just like you would be if you were an SC and selling externally. What are they going to respond to? What does your audience care about? Dial in on that. And then the other thing is, be a good buyer, because then your vendors are going to provide you with that information that's going to make you more effective when you do have to sell internally.
Yeah. And loved how actually you were coming up with like, hey Akash, how do we do this, right? And then we are evaluating 3 other solutions along with Storylane, right?
Yep.
Tell us what some of the things they have told. Do you guys do this? And this honest conversation between your vendors, as in like your buyers and yourself as a vendor, is really helpful, because then it brings front and center as to the true value of that solution and feeds back into the ROI that we have. And that's really actually helpful, because then Tom has in his arsenal any, like when your buyers are making a decision, have that in the arsenal as to, okay, these are the real comparison points, and this is what matters to our teams and for our organizations to be successful in terms of feature sets, in terms of the service that your solution provides to your buyers.
That's a great point. So to take this conversation way out of left field here, but I just moved, and I've got 2 different lawn companies telling me they want to mow my lawn. I could apply this to that, right? I love like these solution engineering pieces and business pieces that I can apply. And it's like, I need to be a good buyer. I actually need to talk about competition and price points.
Yeah.
Put in the chat if you have any funny stories there. But I think if anybody here on the call is trying to get budget, is trying to sell internally, let's think about ourselves being that external resource in like selling internally, and maybe that will help. That's wonderful. And in solution engineering, we are a revenue organization, believe it or not, right? We should be focusing on those accounts, or at least have a mindset to know which accounts have a bigger impact for the business revenue than those who don't. A lot of the time that's difficult to do in pre-sales, depending on what organization you're a part of. So I'm excited. I'm interested, Sean, in your experience, because the way that you run your team, the product of zero trust is super complicated. It's expensive for some. How do you help your team retain focus on the needle movers, or do you at all?
So I love that question, because over the over the 25 plus years that I've been in pre-sales, I've worked for multiple startups and multiple really big companies, right? And I think that the answer to that question really depends on the type of company you are, where you are in your growth and your maturity, right? We're a company that's roughly about 120 people right now. We are about growth. So we're simultaneously focused on trying to acquire new customers, right? Acquire new logos. So that's a lot of the focus, right? So it's not necessarily looking at those at the whales necessarily, because we need to be able to bring in those logos. Where I was at Forescout and we had, or BMC before that, or what have you, right? You've got an established market share, you've got established customers, you've got Fortune 50 customers that spend, 7 or 8 figures with you annually. There is a need to continue to maintain those and manage them and nurture them and keep them happy. So, I think on the more mature, larger company size, you can really sort of look at introducing things like a technical account manager or customer success teams, that really sort of sit in this hybrid kind of a role, that have sort of one leg in maybe the post sales or delivery camp, that are technical, but they're technical from a delivery perspective. They are technical from an implementation, from a real world problems, right? Because we as pre-sales, we maybe don't, unless we've come from that space and we've made the transition into the pre-sales side, we don't necessarily have what the real implementation looks like, what the real problems we solve are, or what problems are introduced to our customers when we bring in our technology, right? What type of process reengineering needs to take place? So I think on one hand, if you're at a larger company, you bring in sort of this construct of customer success, of technical account manager. When you're smaller, you do your best to keep your head above water, right? Because
Right.
as I said, you're doing everything. One of the things that we are, some of the projects that I've taken on at Zage are doing some POC streamlining, right? Are doing some demo automation, and bringing in the ability to provide for self-service demo orchestration, right? So that we don't necessarily need to be on, and this was kind of one of the questions that was earlier about AI-driven virtual sales engineers and those kinds of things. This does not replace a sales engineer or a pre-sales consultant. What it does is it allows a customer or a prospect to consume our technology when they want, where they want, how they want, and at their convenience, right? So I think you have the ability to sort of exponentially increase your exposure out into the prospects by allowing them to view and get their hands on and kick the tires and all of those metaphors, by not necessarily having to. So I think that's part of how we can deal with the needle movers is look, we still like the way that I equate this, and it's funny. I think there's a vaudeville act, right? So I don't know how well this translates internationally, but it's like a carnival and you're spinning plates and then you're juggling, but you're juggling while you're standing on a board on top of a roller, right? That's
That's
kind of the
actually
that's
what
the pre-sales.
And that's what I've seen actually. So a lot of times there's so many opportunities coming in the pre-sales world that sometimes we lose what is that needle mover, right? The high ACV, like 500K deal versus the 10K deal.
Yeah.
And AEs are bringing us to customize demos and bring demos even for the 10K deals, right? So
Yeah.
that's where I think the pre-sales engineer who has their head where they're questioning, I think this ties back to one of the earlier questions from the audience. How does pre-sale like find that focus? So question your AEs and ask
Yeah.
them, why is this deal important, right? Why is a 10K deal more important, and for you to be able to spend that time? And and once you identify the needle mover, spend the time there, but let the tools take care of the 10K deals, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let
And
demo automation start to come and play for you. Let enable your AEs to just run with those demos that you have created as templates in a demo automation tool, right? Like Storylane, and that actually is very helpful for the entire team, because it really helps the AEs run with it. They feel like they are not depending on pre-sales and really logged in with this gear ratio where pre-sales is always so stretched.
yeah, I couldn't agree more with both what with Akash and Sean said. And I tend to be a very hard process guy. And I've experienced what Sean has said, worked at a startup. That was my first pre-sales job, first two. And you end up doing everything. We didn't have I mean, we did have CSMs, we did have account managers, but kind of ended up doing that. And now we have the luxury of having customer success managers and technical customer success managers, but it still bleeds back to the SCs because we tend to be the most specialized still. And because I mean, at least in our org, if somebody's a really good CSM or a technical CSM, they then become an SC. And so there's always that temptation. Oh, I want to pull that SC in. They were that good. They were so good in that pre-sales. I think they can keep this needle mover happy. I think they're going to be happy with, they're going to be the better one to sell into that white space. And there are instances where we're like, absolutely, given that there's this much revenue, to that point that Akash was saying, once we hit this certain threshold, yes, let's bring in the SC, but let's be super strategic about it. If this is for a $5,000, $10,000 upgrade, does that really make sense? Is that a best use of the SCs? And that's again coming to the why we're stretched so thin. But for me and my experiences, having those strict delineated rules, which again works when you have an organization that is big enough to do that. But in that startup world, that's like the quintessential spread thin SC who's doing the CSM, doing the technical CSM, doing some account management, probably doing a little bit of support, and just keeping maybe the project management, keeping the customer happy because they are so specialized.
Yeah. We had a question come in that's very similar to this, Tom. I had a lot of questions, so I'm trying to make sure we answer everyone. So, but it's from Gora on how do you push back on reps that ask for a demo without having done any discovery? Do you push back at all? And I think to your point you just made, you kind of like, you use the question as a question thing, like, hey, how important is this deal back to them?
Yeah.
So what do you do there?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing is, I mean, for me, it's a fundamental no. And if they're like, well, they just want to see they want to get right into the product, that's where demo automation comes in, or that's where we call it a helicopter demo. It's like, fine, we'll get on a call with them, but you need to set the expectation that we need to learn more about them. And you need to set the expectation. And I imagine this is something that everybody feels, where we have complex products that can solve many, many different problems, but what they care about are their problems. We need to hone in on their problems and only show the things that are relevant. So what I usually do is I tell the rep, you're not going to get an SC for this unless you reframe this. You tell them, hey, we may see some of the product, but our technical person who knows this product better than me, they want to ask you some questions to make sure to show you the things that are relevant. And then when that SC gets on that call, there's a line that I have them start with that has worked really well for me when I did this, and I still do this. I still get on discoveries and run them because I love them. I can't help it. It's one of my favorite parts of the sales process. And I start with, hey, we're going to have a conversation today. And we may come at the end of this and realize we're not a fit. And rather than waste your time for an hour, hour and a half demo only to totally miss the mark, I want to figure that out today. Now, if there's some things that, if there's some problems that we can solve today, maybe pop in and see a little bit, I'll show those to you. So you get to actually see the product. And that line, you have now established, I'm not here to sell you, even though we know that's exactly what we're doing. I'm here to consult. And I'm going to give you an honest opinion that this might not work. And we do that sometimes. We come at the end of these calls. I've done this, say, I'd love to work with you, but I don't think we're what you need. And being that open with it, and you're saving yourself time and heartache anyway. If they're not a good fit, they're going to churn. It's going to be a long process, or you're going to lose it anyway. Save yourself time and go right to it. But that is huge. It just, they feel like, all right, you're here to actually consult with me. It's not just a title. And then to buoy this, or actually to augment this, we also start to fold in that demo automation, or we actually sometimes the SCs will go into the product sometimes, depending on what it is. And the demo automation and the product, the way we make that delineation is, okay, is this something I want to leave them with? Is this something that I can, I can kind of click through and do this quickly? Or can I just go into the product very quickly and demonstrate how easy it is to get to this one point so that they have an idea? And I leave that to the SC's discretion. And again, that's why we have such specialized people. But to the fundamental crux of your question, it's a hard no. No discovery, no demo. We can meet you in between. But if you're just like, hey, show me what you got, or give me a generic demo, it's no. I give you a generic demo and I'll give you a loss every time.
Yeah, I love the helicopter demo concept that you have, because it's basically for the deals that really sales can carry over. And then I really love the point where I think pre-sales is keeping sales honest. That's what a lot of us do here, right? So
Yeah, funny enough, my biggest takeaway from that, Tom, is great leadership. So kudos to you for having that line for your team. Even Jeff put a comment in our Q&A around the experience of strong sales leadership. So you brought in and build those goals with your teams. And I think it's every SE's dream to work underneath a director who's really able to draw that line in the sand and do it for a reason. But we've talked about demos. I know, and I've met other SEs recently who spend a little amount of time on the demos. The demo's the easiest part. I'm thinking of tools like Sneak and other security tools that, like, the ecosystem is much more important than demonstrating the value of their product. And that's where they spend 90% of their time. So I want to shift those. Is anybody on the call live who spends most of their time in POCs? I'm just very curious about that. In my career, I've spent most of my time doing demos. But when it comes to POCs, we've also had a question too, because they seem to take a lot of time. How do you enable those in your org? So if it's the bulk of the work, like, how do you enable the POCs? What do you do to make the POCs lighter, like a lighter lift? And I'll pass that over to you, Sean.
Well, thank you, because the wheel started to turn when you asked that question. I think there's a couple ways. One way that we're solving for scaling of POCs is that there's a couple ways. We have what we call a POC light environment, which is hosted, canned, minimal customizations or configurations. It's really pretty standard. We'll provide end user access. And for the most part, they're going to get what they get, right? Which is the same thing that we would show Chris and Tom and Akash. And then there is something that's a little more involved, that is custom installed, potentially on premise or in their cloud environment, that involves potentially custom use cases. And really the question around the ecosystem, or sort of the third-party integrations, is one I think that really needs to be mutually discussed by sales leadership, right, and pre-sales leadership, and make a determination on there's a trade-off There's a trade-off of the investment of time versus the return, right? Is it a very strategic customer, right? If it's going to be a very small deal, dollar-wise, is it very strategic? Is it a strategic land opportunity that gives us a beachhead upon which we can expand to a significant extent? Or is it just a puny opportunity for a mom and pop, right? In which case you say, well, look, it's really not something that is, or right, there's obviously other considerations that need to be brought in around what is the level of effort? Is it truly an out of the box? Is it connecting to an API and checking a box, right? That we've been able to bidirectionally integrate and send data and receive data, right? That's relatively simple. Is it much more involved where there's orchestration involved, where there's workflows that need to be tied off in some way, shape, or form with third-party system, a SOAR, what have you? So there is no hard and fast or even necessarily a rule. It's a case-by-case basis, which I have the luxury of dealing with because it's a small company and we've only got so many to work with. Obviously, when we scale, when we get more of those, we need to have more of a standardized type of a process for sure.
Yeah. Akash,
And
how do you find what do you do to make it easier?
yeah, so this is something that's very close to our hearts, right? So POC actually POCs take just a tortuous amount of time sometimes, right? Back to what Sean was saying, there is these integrations that you have to showcase. You have to really integrate it for them, then get a bunch of users in your buyer's organization to be able to use it, right? So it calls for full population of data. Tom also with time and attendance, basically there needs to be real use in the buyer's org to for any POC to work, right? But how do you show all that value without having to do anything, without they onboarding their users on their side, or integrations with other tools and processes, right? So what demo automation tools like Storylane do, right? Storylane is able to like automate that whole process, as in give a full view of what true POC with fully populated data is like for a customer and customize it for them easily with a standard template that Storylane does. Which of course an SE and a pre-sales team member can build. And with that, basically they have these demos, again, these helicopter demos and templates that they can send to the champion. Which can be distributed across the entire buyer's organization during the POC time. And that actually really helps the early part of the POC and some of these less strategic deals. So automate all of that, get them going to the 80% mark, right? When there is real intent to buy, that's when you want to really get your time going on crafting those POCs. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good comments, Akash. Thank you. And I was thinking that too. I was thinking, man, if you're building an automation tool, there's got to be a way to cut and carve that time and focus. But like, I love the comment in here that Lauren's made around scope, right? POCs, scope creep can happen like crazy.
Yeah.
So it's about like just agreeing very, very specifically on those targeted. And I did this to the last organization. Like, we have to have an agreed upon target, what good looks like, so that we move forward and we agree on those steps before we even get into it.
Yeah,
So that's cool.
It's really interesting that when we're doing a POC or like there's two different ways we do it. One, all right, can we mock this up in a demo work, which to Akash's point takes an incredible amount of time. The other thing is, are we doing this to the point where we've mocked this up in a demo org and we've basically done half of an implementation? And for our enterprise, for our larger deals, if we're going to hit that point, we start to think, okay, this might be worth it, but we need to get something out of them for this. We call it the give get. And y'all probably heard this, where it's like, all right, fine. We'll build you a POC, but pay us a little bit of pay us to do this. This is basically an engagement, a consulting engagement. If you go with us, we'll then fold that into your implementation cost because we've started building your org. If you don't, that's part of, that's part of the cost of doing business. Now you have to have a very skilled sales team to pull that off, but it also gives you some stickiness in there as well. Because yeah, exactly. Paid pilot. and
Well,
it's all, yeah, it's
and
exact,
Tom,
exact. Go
there was a
ahead.
question from Anonymous that said any preference benefits differences seen between a free or paid POC or POV. And so I think you hit that on the head, but an interesting question. So in those paid POC engagements, does
Yeah.
your team perform them or does your post sales team perform them?
We do part of it. We do
Okay,
part of it because we've been so close to it.
right.
And if there's deeper implementation pieces, we'll sometimes bring in our professional services team.
Yeah.
Usually we'll do it, but
And
we'll do the bulk of it.
I think to the question in the chat in the Q&A, I would say from a preference perspective, there's revenue, right?
Yeah.
First and foremost, right?
Yep.
Right.
That is certainly a key. I think a benefit is that you're getting to there's investment on the customer's part, right? They
Yep.
are putting skin in the
Exactly.
game,
Yep.
which I think really goes to establish a stickiness that we just come in strictly in a pre-sales capacity where the customer's not really putting any skin in the game and do a POC, they can get sidetracked by other projects. They
Exactly.
can not dedicate the requisite amount of time to really evaluate and kick the tires, right? Any number of things could come up that, after, let's say, a month of a POC, you're ready to sort of go through and sort of do a debrief or an outbrief and sort of check all of the boxes of success criteria. And they're like, yeah, we can't really say yes because we didn't have the time. Okay, well then you're in this situation of, well, we really don't want to lose this opportunity. We've already put the time in, so we extended another month, right? And then you deal with deal lags, right? Not making their way through the funnel. And so I certainly, if there's an ability to get a paid POC, I think for a number of reasons it's advantageous.
Yeah. And I think in the chat also, Jeff Myers, Tom Banton, they did a really good job of that, like how you draw that line in the sand. I think
Yep.
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. If it's an SOW, pro services, absolutely makes sense. And if yeah, and then I think Jeff echoed a lot of the things you said, Sean, which is it's skin in the game. That goes so far.
Yeah, the SOW aspect also comes in handy because then you exactly move towards what everybody's trying to accomplish, right? It's very clear for the customer how they will engage in the POCs to drive to the success and what they need to accomplish in that short 1 month of POC, for example.
Yeah, that's great points. The real Tom Benton's in the house. Thanks, Tom. Love to see that, man. Good to see you here. And Jeff, just awesome points. I mean, I'm sitting here shaking my head. Like there's so many great points in here. And I'm starting to think after this quick conversation on if I was managing those POCs and I would look for these kind of like these ways to make them faster, like you said, or ways to ensure that I have a line drawn between agreement before going into them with my buyer. Because buyer enablement, Tom, you talked about being a buyer. This word is used all over the place in pre-sales. We hear it all the time. I'm also interested in how like the buyer journey has changed, how we're adapting to those demands, how and Akash specifically from you because you build tools for a living. I mean, you've built an organization and you were a solution engineer. How do you see and what decisions did you make to make your tool or any product more buyer friendly?
Yeah, so when we started the company, I think an interesting challenge was starting to play, right? So we talked to like 100 odd folks who had software products and wanted to enable like POCs, enable buyers. And there was the startup kind, right? There were like medium-sized companies and there were enterprises. So, and each with different product complexities, right? So one of the things that really starting to happen is product-led growth. What it means is you will see a lot of products where you can sign up by yourself, try it, and that's what product-led growth is. So we said right at the onset, we will shoot for simplicity. We'll allow anybody democratize this whole process, buying process, which is what we live up to, right? In two ways. One is we will allow simple trials for our buyers. So that really gets 50% of the folks who want quick wins to see how a product like Storyline works are able to do it. Then there is the other piece of buyers who don't even have time to do a free trial. What do you do for them? So that's also where Storyline, we dock food Storyline ourselves. On our website, you will see a interactive demo of Storyline right front and center where it says, take a tour of Storyline. And there you can click through and see the different features we offer, right? The HTML customization capabilities in a no-code way. How do you share it with your buyers? How do you send leave behinds? All of that, and how does marketing use it? So you're able to do that without having the buyer to really play and then just get into the POC and break their heads, right? In some ways.
So it sounds like you're meeting them where they are. You're giving them a lot of
Correct.
different options. Ease of
Exactly.
use is what I keep hearing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Uh,
kind of it's kind of the way that I sort of look at this is that buyers want to consume at their own pace, in their own means, in their own mechanisms, in their
Mm-hmm.
own ways, at their own schedule,
Mm-hmm.
which often runs counter to us as part of the sales organization, right? We want to be involved. We want to help control. We want to help steer. We want to help move things along through the sales process, right? So I think trying to find that fine line of being able to provide them the ability to consume the technical information around the product and the value propositions and the ability to start to appreciate the value that they can get out of the capabilities of the product sort of on their own in that very easily consumed fashion, while also sort of simultaneously ensuring that sales, the account execs and the SEs have the information that they need in order to help move that deal along. I think that's like the nirvana, right? Is getting to that point where you can provide them what they want while also being able to say, you know what, I'm don't look behind the curtain, but I'm gonna bring you to where I want you to go from a journey, from a destination perspective.
yeah, that's awesome. Tom, any words on this? Buyer enablement. Talk about it
Buyer
a
enable,
lot.
yeah. When I think about that one, it's they you have to be careful, at least in my experience. The buyers think they're more educated about you and your product than they may or may not be. Now, they're like, oh, I did research on your website. I've done research on your product. I've read all the case studies on your website, and they're not always sure what they need, or they're not always aligned with precisely what you do and how that figures into what they need. And I think it brings up a couple of problems because they're more resistant to hearing what you're going to tell them about your company. For example, I hate when I see this slide in a sales deck where it's like, about us, we've been around for 35 years, and they've probably already figured that out, if they even care about that. And it is, and rather than informing them about the product, it's informing them about a process and selling them on this process. And again, honing in on exactly what they need and how to fully uncover what they need. And I think also pulling back, a lot of buyers, they want to focus on, all right, for us, like, I have a problem with time and attendance, or I have a problem with scheduling. Like, it takes us too long to schedule. Okay, but let's think about how this fits broadly into what you're doing as a business. Yeah, it takes this many hours to do scheduling. You want to cut back on that. But why is this important to the broader things, broader goals that you have as a business? And that I find really helps with enabling them, because that comes back to what we were talking about earlier. When they have to make that broader argument, when they have to make that argument to executive leadership or whoever, then you've enabled them as well. And that's so they have one sense of what it means. It's knowing what you do and what your company does. And really what you need to do is, how do you give them the tools to make that internal sale? And it's more than just, you need X and we do X. It's, you need X, we do X, and this is how it gets into those broader goals of the organization.
All right, we're going to get into the lightning round. We have 5 minutes. If I do a time check correctly, and people are going to run the demos and managing teams and get back into the working world. So thank you all for spending so much time with us. Like, really appreciate it. But I cannot leave this panel without asking the question about pre-sales and sales collaboration. The three of you guys have 300 years of experience together. So I want to just take this, Tom, to you, like, any parting words of guidance on collaboration?
Yeah. I remember, I think about this question a lot. There is my last company, there is a sales leader who was a former Army officer, and this came from his Army days, and he would say this to the sales organization. I co-opted this to any conversation I have with sales reps, sales leaders, and SCs, especially if they're in the room together. And that is, never win alone, never lose alone. And the point of that is, we are in this together, and they need to understand that. You know, it helps if the SCs are on a commission model. And I tell them, I was like, SCs aren't a commission. They will get more money if we win. They are just as, maybe not just as, but they are incentivized just like you are to win. And they're going to have very strong opinions if they think we're going about this wrong. Trust them, work with them, see them as another leader in the process. And I also bring up to them, hey, you were in how many discoveries last year? This is how many the average SC was in. You saw how many demos last year? This is the average number of demos that an SC saw. They're saying way more than you. And the way I want you to view an SC is almost like having another sales manager who you don't report to, who is just going to coach you and help you and coach the deal, and is just as motivated to get this across. But if you mess up, it's not the same ramifications as your sales manager there. And I really like to push this and get them to understand, yeah, we position ourselves as the technical nerds, but we are wolves in sheep's clothing. Yeah, we know the product inside and out, but we are there to win, and we're there to get the deal across just like you.
Any parting words of guidance, Sean? We've got 2 minutes.
Or along the same topic, or anything in general?
Just anything in general, man.
So the best advice I've ever gotten, and it was not a lesson. It was a lesson I needed to learn when I first got into the industry 25 years ago. Because we're all passionate, right? We are all technicians. We're technical. We've got really cool stuff that we're trying to sell to our customers and our prospects, right? So we are very proud. Like, all of those characteristics, and there's all kinds of books and all of this and different techniques, but listen, and embrace the awkward silence, right? Ask the question and then shut up. And it's literally almost like a competition. The first one to talk loses, right? And let the customer, because they genuinely, if it's a legitimate where you can really help them and they really need the help, they're going to open up. So as long as we don't speak too quickly, just let the silence sort of permeate throughout the call.
I love that.
Love it.
Akash, any words of guidance?
Yeah, but just we are not demo machines. I think that is right. It's and listening is winning most of the battle. As I think I couldn't agree more. I think that those are great parting words.
You know, I tend to learn a lot more when I listen than I do when I speak. And on that note, I'm going to close down the webinar. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tom, Sean, Akash. Please, everyone on the call, everyone in the recordings, reach out to these guys, connect with them on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you for staying through the journey. Thank you for being a Presales Collective member. We're here to learn, grow, and connect every single time. Take care and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you,
y'all.
everyone.